Hello and welcome everyone. The full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio. Guided releasing practice. Welcome. How is everyone today? I am going to get my windows situated here so I can have an eye on the comments on the chat while we're live. We're getting a late start today. Eventually, I will have all of this tech stuff figured out. Guaranteed. Let's set up our pop-out chat here for YouTube. For those of you who might be joining us live from the YouTube channel, welcome. Our returning viewers. If you're already subscribed, thank you. And welcome everyone who might be new to the broadcast. Let me make sure I've got the right windows going here. Looks good. Hopefully you can hear me and see me okay. So, anyone is on live, please pop into the chat and let me know that you've got volume, because that is the one thing that we've had tech issues with lately. Hopefully the sound quality is good, the video quality is good. I am going to jump into today's broadcast because we're running a little bit behind schedule, and I apologize for that. Tech. Go figure. All right. Here's my notes. Let's talk about this. We have a lunar eclipse going on, y'all. This is kind of exciting. I don't know about you. If you've been with me for a while, you know I love the full moon broadcasts because I love the act, the ritual, the process of releasing and letting go. This is a huge way that we make space to invite new into our lives, and it's hugely important. It's part of the cycle. It's part of the natural cycle of the natural world, and it's something that we should really embrace to take advantage of in the best way. Let me move these YouTube comments, and then maybe I can see our Facebook comments at the same time. All right, so welcome. I'm Phaedra. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystick, Physick, Astrology. So for those of you who are new to the broadcast, welcome. I use Western Sidereal astrology in my practice, and so tonight with the broadcast, we're going to be working with the Fagan Bradley Sidereal Zodiac. And if you do not have a copy of Fagan Bradley Sidereal natal chart, you can get one. There is a link that you can click on in the video description that will take you to my website, mystickphysick.com, where you can use the Sidereal chart calculator to create your own sidereal natal chart. Tonight specifically, you're going to want to know your rising sign, sun sign. These might be different from your tropical signs. You're also going to want to be able to look for specific degrees in specific signs. And so it would be worthwhile to have your chart in front of you if you don't have it memorized, because we're going to be referring to specific places in the chart that you'll want to have an eye on. Of different principles that we're going to be going over tonight that are all going to be related to your particular chart. So it'll be helpful to have it with you. Really, my aim with the work that I do is to help you reconnect with your soul purpose and remember why you came into this incarnation to begin with, because there is a reason, and oftentimes we forget it along the journey of life, and I'm here to help you remember what that is and kind of reconnect with it. And my aim really with these broadcasts and with all the broadcasts that we do on Mystick, Physick, Astrology is really to provide guidance on how you can consciously use the energy of the transiting planets to affect your life in a positive way. And so the idea is to learn to be responsive to your astrological transits rather than reactive to your astrological transits. And just as the new moon is the time for conception, the full moon is a time for giving birth to something. Often this is something that was conceived or begun either at the new moon just 2 weeks prior or at the previous new moon in the same sign 6 months earlier. Okay? Generally with eclipses, we're looking at that 6-month cycle. It's a little bit longer. And an entire cycle of eclipses usually plays out over 18 to 24 months. The full moon, however, which is what we're experiencing tonight, this is a great time to let go of beliefs. It's a time to let go of behaviors. It's a time to let go of attitudes and habits that don't serve you any longer. That might be preventing you from achieving something that you really, really want, whether you recognize it or not. And what we're going to be doing in this video, we'll walk through the practice of identifying what it is we want to let go or move past, and then we're going to write it down on a piece of paper, and we're going to either burn it or tear it up, and we're going to release those old energetic patterns, allowing us to make room for something new and fresh to take its place. And at an eclipse, this is a particularly powerful practice to do. And I would underscore that at an eclipse, I would encourage you to do this practice not only for your sidereal rising sign, which aligns it with your own natal chart, but I would encourage you also to do this practice with your sidereal sun sign. Because eclipses are 10 times more powerful than regular new and full moons. Like they're significantly more powerful than a typical lunation. And so you want to capture that power, and you want to harness it, and you want to direct it. And this is how we do that. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that double whammy and do it for your rising sign and your sun sign. Okay, and so in this full moon video, what I'm going to do is guide you through exploring how you can use this particular full moon to let go of grudges, to release like emotional junk that might be keeping you stuck, to break through fears around vulnerability. This is a critical piece when we're talking about the Scorpio puzzle. Vulnerability is key here. And so the idea is we're going to do these things that cover the key to your own personal metamorphosis. Life is nothing but change, right? Adapt or die. And so this is adapt time. This is change metamorphosis time. And we want to harness this very powerful moment of change and use it to enable and facilitate evolution. So grab a pen and paper, grab your sidereal natal chart, or at least, know your sidereal rising sign to begin with. And together, what we're going to do is use this full moon to let. And so thank you for joining me. What I want to talk about in the first part of the video is a little bit about this particular full moon. And I'm going to preface that with a conversation about this eclipse season that we're moving into. And then in part 2 of the video, we're going to talk about which house this is falling into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign. And then for the third part of our video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the archetype of Scorpio, the themes of Scorpio. We're going to review some prompts to have a little inspiration if you're not quite sure what it is you want to let go of during this full moon. And then we'll go into our release itself. And if you'll give me just one moment, I just kind of want to check the status of everything here. There we go. And we should be pretty well set to get going and just diving right in. All right, so let's go here. So to start off with, let's talk about this current season that we're in and kind of frame it for you so you know where we're at in terms of moving through the eclipse cycles. So eclipse cycles, as I was saying earlier in the broadcast, run in 18 to 24 month long periods where every 6 months we usually have 2, sometimes 3 eclipses in a pair of signs opposite each other in the zodiac. And then at the end of that 18 to 24 month cycle, they shift into the next pair of signs, and they gradually process their way around the zodiac in this fashion. And by the Fagan Bradley sidereal zodiac, right now, as we move into the mid-2020 eclipse season, we're coming to the end of the Gemini Sagittarius series that began July 12th, 2018. So this has been running for almost 2 years now. And it's going to end July 4th, 5th-ish. Like that's the last eclipse in the cycle, July of this year. Okay, so it's a full 2-year cycle. Time during the mid-year eclipse season. Hi, Donnie. Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Thanks for joining us. So at the same time, we're entering a new series of eclipses, and that's the Taurus Scorpio cycle. That's beginning June 5th of this year, which is tomorrow. And it's going to last until May 2022. So another rather long cycle. And so what this means is that we have a new period of change that begins unfolding over the coming 24 months. affecting those folks with Taurus or Scorpio, sun or rising sign, or with a personal planet point at an eclipse degree during that time frame. And then at the same time, in the coming 6 weeks or so, those with the Gemini or Sagittarius sun or rising sign, or with a planet or point at one of the eclipse degrees in the Gemini Sagittarius series, who've been undergoing these major shifts already, unfolding in their lives under the past couple of years, those folks are going to start to see those changes enter their final stage of transition in the coming months. And so your lives will finally begin to settle into whatever their new routine, new appearance, new shape is, if you're one of the folks affected by the Gemini Sagittarius series, okay? The houses that Gemini, Sagittarius, Taurus, and Scorpio occupy in your sidereal natal chart, those are the houses that are going to be activated by these eclipses as we move into the next 6 weeks. In some cases, eclipses can activate the house and sign exactly opposite. So do keep that in mind. You'll want to have your eye kind of on both places in your chart at any given eclipse just to see what happens, because they can. By that law of polarity, they can activate the house and sign opposite. Tomorrow's eclipse, the June 5th, 2020 eclipse, is a full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio at 20 degrees 32 minutes. This is the one we're going to be talking about tonight. It's the one we're going to be working with tonight. We're just in the crest of this full moon lunar eclipse energy. So it's active right now. It's particularly powerful. And what you want to do with this eclipse is check your water and earth signs. So you're going to be looking for a planet or personal point at 20 or 21 degrees of Scorpio, Pisces or Cancer, Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn. And you can include planets or points within plus or minus, say, 4 or 5 degrees of either side. Although keep in mind, the effect is going to be stronger the closer they are to your planet or point, the closer your planet or point is to actual eclipse degree. Now, this particular full moon has the potential to be kind of an emotionally tense full moon. And we can be prone potentially to impulsiveness, to headstrong behavior. Passions can kind of run high. I talked about this on my June and July 2020 eclipse season video, the latest one. You may want to watch that, because on that one I go into more detail about the upcoming new moon solar eclipse in Gemini and the final full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius coming up on July 5th. But I do talk about this, so some of this may be familiar if you've already watched that video. But there's a potential for anger and arguments and like these heated passions to kind of boil over. And they could involve or relate to secrets or deception potentially. If there's a keyword that you could use to describe this full moon, I would say it's complicated. But like I was saying in the eclipse video that I recorded a couple weeks ago, that's a keyword that you could really kind of use to describe Scorpio in general, right? It's complicated. But with this particular full moon, we may have impulses to escape from reality. I think we probably are all kind of feeling that a little bit right now, ready to get away from what we've been being bombarded with. We're ready for a breather. We're ready for a break. We're ready to stop and kind of retreat and regroup and catch our breath, because it's very overwhelming, right? Business, relationships, money, values, all of these things are on our minds. And we're really kind of seeking to understand what's the correct course of action, what is the best path ahead, but we're trying to figure out what that is without having all the information and knowledge available that we need to make good discernment out of the situation. Now, what I want you to watch for is the potential for a stroke of insight about what to do, or the best course of action, which may be also a new course of action, perhaps one that you hadn't considered before. And I want to underscore that because the astrology of this lunar eclipse really says that inspired action is the catalyst for the change that this eclipse can bring. Now, I will give you one piece of advice as a word of caution. This is not a good time to be making agreements with a partner. So I would really just wait, kind of hold off if you're at that kind of stage in life. You're better off waiting and just kind of seeing what plays out in the coming week or so, if not a little bit longer. And that really kind of wraps it for talking about the particular astrology of this full moon lunar eclipse. In this next section, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into which house this is falling into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign. And we're going to talk about what the themes of that house are. So if you're not super familiar with the house systems, you may want to grab a pen and paper and jot down the house and what these themes are. If you are familiar with the houses in astrology, feel free to take a break, go grab a snack, come back in about 10 minutes. We'll be ready to move on to part 3. And so diving right in, if you have Aries rising, this is going to be, of course, an 8th house full moon for you. So that has to do with other people's resources that are at your disposal. It has to do with investment earnings, insurance, taxes, inheritance, and estate matters. It can also include bonus or commission income. And then the 8th house is related to other themes that don't have to do with finance, things like the occult, death, rebirth, transformation and metamorphosis, psychology, research, deep investigation, things like that. For Taurus, this is a 7th house full moon. So that's partnership, right? That's marriage partnership, that's business partnership, any kind of long-term committed relationship that you have with someone. The 7th house can also describe our relationships with other people in general. And so this is about how we interact with the other in our lives. The 7th house is a really good opportunity to focus on doing a little bit of shadow work, if you like, especially when we're talking about the descendant, which of course is the opposite point from the ascendant. That really speaks to what we tend to reject about ourselves and project onto other people. And so that's really a key point when you're talking about using astrology to do shadow work for yourself. For Gemini rising, this is going to be a 6th house full moon. So that has to do with work, health, daily routines, diet, lifestyle, things like this. And pets, if you have those are also 6th house matters. The 6th house really has to do with your daily schedule. What are your patterns? What are your habits? What kind of systems do you have going in your life? And at the full moon, something can kind of come to fruition, or one of those pieces may come to an end as you prepare to move on to something better for yourself. For Cancer rising, this will be a 5th house full moon. So that, of course, has to do with creativity. It has to do with children. It has to do with love and romance. That's what the 5th house is all about, right? Not marriage. That's 7th house. We just talked about that. The 5th house is the natural domain of Leo, and that rules the heart. So this has to do with pleasurable activities, and one of those pleasurable activities is love. Also can relate to sports and gambling, risk-taking, hobbies, things that involve our own creative energy. For Leo, this is a 4th house full moon. So that'll relate to home and family. That'll relate to real estate. That'll relate to later life, your parents. These are all 4th house matters. For Venus, at a 3rd house full moon. So that's related to transportation and writing and communication. But unlike the 9th house, which is opposite, this is all communication and travel and things that happen over short distances. They happen local to you rather than long distance. Okay. Now, the 3rd house also relates to your immediate environment in terms of your community, your neighborhood, your neighbors themselves, and it represents your siblings and your extended family, so things like aunts and uncles and cousins. For Libra, this is a 2nd house full moon. So this is related to wealth and possessions. It's related to movable assets, so things that you own, assets that you own that aren't real estate. Has to do with earned income, so money that you receive from the work that you do every day, your 6th house work, your 6th house labor. It has to do with expenses, also has to do with personal values, self-worth, priorities, things of that nature. For Scorpio, this is a 1st house full moon, right? So this has to do with identity. This has to do with self-expression. This has to do, if you have Scorpio rising, it has to do with your physical body, your appearance, your role in the world, the way that you present yourself. Excuse me, I'm bumping the microphone. I'm sure that's loud on your end. Sorry about that. For this is a 12th house full moon. So that's related to privacy and seclusion. It's related to spirituality. It's related to the unconscious mind, things that happen in the periphery of our awareness, right? Has to do with highly personal or private projects, things that we do like solo projects or things that we work on behind closed doors, kind of out of the public eye. Also relates to spiritual practices and institutions of seclusion. For Capricorn, this is an 11th house full moon. So this is related to friends, it's related to organizations, it's related to hopes and dreams. And then for Aquarius, we're looking at a 10th house full moon. So career, awards, recognition, achievement, status, and reputation. These are all 10th house matters. The 10th house is really your public face, how others see you, okay? And then for Pisces, this is a 9th house full moon. So all the way to the end of the zodiac, 9th house has to do with higher education. It has to do with long distance travel. It has to do with long distance communication. So things like going to foreign countries or dealing with foreigners. Has to do with like publishing and broadcasting, where you're dealing with large audiences over long distances. And the 9th house also relates to religion, philosophy, and law. And so if anyone has questions about any of that, let me know in the comments. And in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll move on to the Scorpio archetypes and themes, and then I'll circle back around and check for comments or questions as we move on. So Scorpio is ruled by Pluto as the modern ruler and co-ruled by Mars as the traditional ruler. And we're going to talk about this in a little more depth as we get a little bit further into this conversation. This is the sign of the Scorpion. It's fixed water. So you can conceptualize this as like a still, deep pool or well. That's what Scorpio energy is like. It's deeply emotional, but not necessarily emotive, right? This is symbolized as the scorpion, the snake, the eagle, the phoenix. These are all 8th house symbology, which Scorpio is the natural ruler of. And the phoenix is interesting because this very much embodies what Scorpio is about. This is about rising from your own ashes after your own destruction, right? Scorpio represents death and transformation. It's about rebirth and regeneration. And this is probably the main fundamental theme of Scorpio. And it's one of the best ones to be working with at eclipse time. But what I want to call out is, what do all of these creatures have in common? The scorpion, the snake, the eagle, the phoenix, all of these creatures molt, right? So they shed their skin, they shed their exoskeleton, they shed their feathers. They go through a process of casting off what is old, what is unneeded, what has been outgrown, right? And then they undergo a period of vulnerability as they're doing this. They undergo a period of being exposed and then emerge renewed at the end of the process, right? So this is the very powerful transformative energy that I want to encourage you to work with tonight as we move into the releasing process. So as far as archetypes of Scorpio, this is the archetype of it's around secrets. It's related to secrets and occult knowledge. Keep in mind that the word occult simply means hidden. So this is the archetype of the detective or the investigator or the researcher. Think of this as the discoverer of secrets or the uncoverer of secrets. It's the archetype of the psychologist or the counselor, even the priest. Never mind. Let's reel that back in. I'm thinking 9th house. But the psychologist or the counselor is the keeper of secrets, right? They take an oath of confidentiality, and that's where you go to talk about your deepest, darkest quirks and foibles or traumas or whatever it is that you need to talk about on the couch, right? It's also the archetype of the mystic or the alchemist. And keep in mind, the alchemist really transforms, right? Isn't that what the alchemist is seeking to do? To transform lead into gold. The whole philosopher's stone concept, really they're seeking to transform themselves into their higher nature. But this is the student of secrets or of forbidden knowledge, the alchemist. They're a student of secrets. Okay, So this secretive notion is very, very much in alignment with Scorpio and Scorpio energy. Scorpio represents both the underworld and the underbelly. And Scorpio, as we mentioned earlier, is the natural ruler of the 8th house, which is where we assign crime and criminal activity, right? And so folks, for instance, who have Saturn in Scorpio or in the 8th house, this can literally manifest as the fear of being vulnerable or a fear of vulnerability, right? So Scorpio, with this fixed water nature, it's a combined expression of element and quality of the sign. Scorpio tends to hold a grudge. That's not letting go of an emotional wound. That's what fixed water is like. It's very private, very secretive, and you really can't get too close to Scorpio, because if you try and get too close to Scorpio when they don't want you too close, you see that stinger come out, right? So what this means is that Scorpio energy, and how this plays out for each of us depends on where Scorpio lands in our sidereal natal chart. Scorpio resists allowing itself to be vulnerable. So where we find Scorpio in our sidereal natal chart is where we resist allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, right? This can hold back growth and development in the long run. It's not something that you really want to do, and you certainly don't want to do it for a prolonged period of time, because if you don't molt, you can't grow. Molting in the natural world is a very, very tenuous and dangerous process, and if something happens during that process that interferes with it, the creature that's molting could potentially die, right? Molting is important to life. If you don't molt, you can't grow. Scorpio can be manipulative and scheming when we're expressing like the dark side of our, the shadow side of our Scorpio nature. And that's really an expression of Scorpio as being a thinker. Scorpio is the most strategic thinker in the entire zodiac. This is always making plans, but sometimes when we get deep into Scorpio energy or lose sight of our own moral compass, we might forget that people are not chess pieces, right? Even though we're using our Scorpio energy to be strategic about things. So Scorpio, circling back around to our conversation about rulers, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto as the modern rulership, Mars is the traditional rulership. And I want to kind of drill down to each of those individually so you can see how Scorpio is really kind of a blend of the two. I encourage you, when you're reading for a sign that has co-rulers by modern rulerships and traditional rulerships, try to do your readings and your interpretations through both lenses, because I think you get a more clear and more concise and more holistic picture when you do it that way, rather than just sticking to one or the other. In this case, Pluto has domain over death and rebirth, transformation through the process of destruction, wealth, keeping in mind that's the root of the word plutocracy, right? Pluto has domain over secrets and hidden things, that's the underworld. And it represents power and control. Mars, on the other hand, has of libido. And generally when we say that, we mean drive in general, our urge to assert ourselves, our urge to assert our will and to do something with our energy, right? In Scorpio, you could say quite specifically the sex drive, as the 8th house also has rulership over sex. But Mars, keep in mind, also rules Aries, which is the sign of the newborn, and in that sense, Mars has rulership. Mars has rulership of newborns as a principle, and that's representative of this rebirth concept that we encounter in Scorpio. Okay, going through the underworld, literally going through hell. That's Scorpio energy. That's Pluto energy. but coming out and emerging reborn and renewed. Okay. And then Mars also, keep in mind, has rulership over mercenaries and mercenary behavior, aggression, and conflict. And those are some things that we can see play out when we're talking about Scorpio through that association with criminality potentially, or with manipulation, that sort of thing. Okay. So that just kind of gives you an idea what type of energy we are working with when we're talking about Scorpio in the natal chart. And you can kind of get a sense of how that plays out for you, or how you experience Scorpio themes personally. Now what we're going to do is move into the third part of our broadcast, where we look at some individual prompts that we can use as we work through what it is we want to kind of release with the full moon. However, I want to preface this part of the broadcast by saying we're working with an eclipse tonight. This is very powerful lunar energy. And as always, when we're working with eclipses, I encourage you, regardless of what you use in the broadcast, to work with whatever thing it is you feel led to work with. If there's something calling you tonight saying this is what I need to process and let go and release out of my life, by all means do that. Go where you're led. Intuition is always leading us in the right direction in that sense, and follow yours as opposed to what I have laid out here, especially when it comes to eclipse energy. But diving into the prompts, consider where or how you have given away your power or allowed someone to take your power away from you in some way. And are you ready to take back your power? Consider whether or how even are you letting a fear of vulnerability hold you back? Are you being secretive in some way or about something? And is it interfering with your ability to make deep connections with others? Right? Because it's through vulnerability that we're able to make those deep emotional connections with other people. I mean, if we never allow ourselves to be vulnerable with other people, we don't allow the opportunity for that connection to even happen from the beginning. Remember that it's vulnerability with others is the process that allows us to establish trust. Okay? I want you to consider what emotional or psychological baggage you holding on to. And this is new for this particular broadcast about Scorpio full moon. I wanted to kind of explore this notion a little bit deeper in terms of emotional or psychological baggage that we may be holding on to. Is it possibly a wound that needs healing? And I say that because Pluto is about regenerative power. So this is very naturally about the process of healing. Eighth house energy is very strong healing energy. But in the case of the eighth house, in the case of Scorpio, in the case of Pluto, this is about psychological healing. And psychological healing almost always has to do with an emotional wound. And keep in mind, we're working with a water sign that tends to hold on to grudges. It tends to hold on to emotional wounds. So what I want to offer up to you tonight for your consideration is that if this emotional or psychological baggage you're holding on to, is it maybe a wound that needs healing? Is it maybe a hurt that you've been carrying for a long time that you just can't let go of? And I would also offer that most commonly when this is the case, that wound often boils down to either a mother wound or a father wound. Those are the most common wounds that most all of us have, right? Now, other common wounds can be around loss and grief. And this is a house that has to do with death as well. But if you're looking at exploring in that area, those are some considerations for the evening. All consider, is there an outdated version of yourself that you need to shed in order to emerge renewed and refreshed? Are you holding a grudge? And is that really serving you, or is it holding you back from actually moving on? And if you're holding a grudge that's not about an emotional wound, maybe it's about a wound to the ego, ask yourself if holding on to it is really serving your highest interest, or if it's just keeping you stuck in a particular energy. And if you can let it go, if you can take the higher road, right, that may serve you better in the long run. Even if there's not something that you need to heal from necessarily, perhaps it's something that you can forgive. Where are you resisting transformation? Where are you stuck in caterpillar mode? And what I mean by this is I'm asking you to, and we're talking about metamorphosis and transformation, right? Rebirth through the destruction of what came before. This is very much the process that a butterfly goes through from pupae to chrysalis to butterfly, right? So where can you embody the nature of the butterfly? The butterfly serves simply by being a butterfly. Simply by being. It just is, and it serves the world by doing that. So where can you embody the nature of the butterfly? The butterfly pollinates flowers and fructifies plants simply as a byproduct of doing her thing, beautifying the world simply by existing. So how can you step into this idea and embody it? Are you resisting pollinating others and fructifying the world with your being, with your gifts? Can you share your natural gifts with the world? So what I want you to do is take a few minutes for contemplation. I want you to write down what it is you want to let go of this evening of paper. And I would encourage you to even write out why you're letting it go. We've talked about this in the past. I want you to remember the power of because. I haven't talked about it on this broadcast. I think we talked about it for one of the Gemini broadcasts. But there was a social experiment that was conducted where they had folks line up to use a copy machine, or in a line to use a copy machine, and they asked people to go cut in line. And in some situations, they had folks just ask if they could go ahead of the people who were waiting in line. And then they had folks ask to go ahead of people who were already waiting in line because they were in a hurry, or because they only needed to make one copy. So they gave a reason why they would like to go first. And in that scenario, more often than not, the people who had already been waiting for their turn of the coffee at the copy machine were more than willing to let the person go ahead of them. So because has power. And so what I would encourage you to do tonight is, as you write out what it is that you're letting go of on your piece of paper, write out why you want to let it go. Because there's power in because. What I want you to do is really think about what is the new version of yourself that you want to embody. Spend time tonight getting clear on what that looks like, either through visualization, or if you're one of the folks that really isn't able to visualize, you can kind of brain dump this on a separate piece of paper. I would encourage you to do it on a separate piece of paper so that you can keep that and burn your releasing statement. So if you only brought one piece of paper to the broadcast, real quick, tear it in half so that you can use 2 pieces of paper. So whatever it is, take a moment to write it down on your paper. Spend a moment to thank it for the lesson that it brought to you. And then what we're going to do at the very end is do our releasing practice. So go ahead and get started. If you're coming late to the broadcast, I'm going to go ahead real quick here and recap these prompts. And then I'm going to dive in. I got a piece of paper here to my releasing practice. And I brought my bowl this time, and I brought my lighter this time. And yay, I actually get to participate. That's exciting. So let's recap some of these prompts just to refresh. Where or how have you given away your power or allowed someone to take your power from you in some way? And are you ready to take it back? Reclaim that. Are you letting a fear of vulnerability hold you back, and how and why? Are you being secretive in some way or about something? And is it interfering with your ability to make deep connections with other people? Vulnerability allows us to establish trust through those deeper connections that we can make with other people. Or you could consider what emotional or psychological baggage you might be holding onto in Scorpio house. Is it a wound that needs healing? Is it a mother wound or a father wound, perhaps? Those are some of the deepest wounds that we need to heal. And remember, we're talking about Scorpio and 8th house energy. This is very deep energy. And there are, of course, other wounds potentially around loss or grief that we may be dealing with as well. Is there an outdated version of yourself that you need to shed in order to emerge renewed and refreshed? Do you need to exfoliate? Consider that. Emotional exfoliation, personal exfoliation. Are you holding a grudge? And does that really serve you, or is it holding you back from moving on or from growing? Consider where you're resisting transformation or are stuck in caterpillar mode, right? Where are you resisting pollinating others and fructifying the world with your being and your gifts? So, like I said, take a few moments for contemplation. Write down what it is you want to let go of on your paper. I am going to take a moment here to do the same while I bump the microphone. Sorry about that. It's not an ideal setup, but I need room to write down mine. All right, everybody, break and go. That's a good one. Anyone needs more time, please let me know. Unlike last time, I can share this one with you. I'm very excited. I had a nice inspiration for what to use this for. It's perfectly in alignment for what I need right now. I'm very excited about that. And as always, if you know what it is you are letting go of in tonight's broadcast, I invite you to please share it in the comments, whether you're watching on Facebook Live or whether you're watching on YouTube Live. I invite you to share what you're letting go of, if you're comfortable with it, in the comments. I think we all find it kind of inspirational and helpful when we see what other people are working through. Sometimes that can give us kind of an inspiration and insight into our own lives and our own healing processes, what we can also work on for ourselves. And so here's what I wrote for my full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio releasing practice. And actually, after the broadcast is over, after we hop off, I'm going to do this over again for my sun sign. I have Capricorn sun, so I'm going to do this all over again because I think Capricorn, is it a 10th house full moon? I don't remember. I'll have to go back and look. Anyway, yes. So here's what I wrote. I have Gemini ascendant by Sidereal zodiac. So I'm working with the 6th house tonight. And so this has to do, like we said, with health, with daily routines, with diet, with lifestyle, with schedules and habits and things like that. And so when we have a full moon in the 6th house, this is really, really ideal for letting go of bad habits, right? If we're talking about habits and letting go of things at a full moon, let go of what's not working for you. Let go of what's holding back your health or actively worsening it. And it's also a good time for eliminating unhealthy foods from the diet. So things that are just flat out unhealthy for you, or even foods that may otherwise be healthy but aren't necessarily good for you, right? Because we each have different systems, and sometimes we're sensitive to some things that other people might be perfectly fine with, and it might be a food that is otherwise perfectly healthy. Well, for yourself, go with what your body is telling you that it needs and wants. So if there's foods that have been in your diet that aren't furthering your health or are actively harming your health, let them go at the full moon in the 6th house, right? Bad habits, bad foods, 6th house ruling diet and digestion. And the harvest, right, has to do with food. So here's what I wrote from my 6th house releasing. I release whatever emotional junk, grudge, attachment, or wound is responsible for my current health issues, which are Scorpio related, by the way. This is just like, it lines up perfectly. So that healing, regeneration, and healthy transformation, I release this with thanks and gratitude for the lesson that it brought into my life. Because everything that's been in your life is here because it had a lesson for you, right? So send it away with gratitude. Thank it for the lesson. That's a valuable thing that you received from whatever it is you're letting go of. And I also wrote, where the cause or source of this wound is unclear or unknown to me, I invite clarity and awareness of it in order to facilitate my own healing and physical and emotional rebirth, right? Because isn't that what we want? We want our own emotional rebirth. We want our own physical rebirth. So here's the magic bowl, the magic full moon releasing bowl. So say your statement out loud. Whew. I have to figure out a good place for this microphone. But what you want to do is you want to make your statement out loud, what it is you're letting go of. You want to state out loud that you're releasing it with gratitude. You want to thank it. That's super, super important. Thank what it is you're letting go of for the lesson that it brought to you while it was in your life. And then what I like to do after my releasing is spend a few minutes in quiet reflection or meditation, especially. I think with the releasing, super, super important. But you're going to want to do this in a fire-safe place. Burn your paper, right? So a fire pit or a fireplace. If you don't have access to anything like that, you can use your kitchen sink in a pinch. If you're burning it, make sure that it burns completely, right? But you don't have to burn it if you'd rather not. If you're worried about fire or you don't have a place to burn it, you can tear it up into tiny little pieces and just let it along. It's just the act that's important and the intention behind it. It's all very representational, right? So you're going to do your let go. Make your statement. And then after you hop off the broadcast, spend a few minutes in quiet reflection, spend a few minutes in meditation. Think of it as a moment of silence for whatever it is you're letting go of, right? And please let me know in the comments what it is you're letting go of this evening. It's for you really tonight. Nothing, well, I was going to say nothing super exciting. That would not be completely correct because this is the eclipse season. So watch my latest eclipse season video. If you haven't seen it yet, it's up on the website. You can also watch it on YouTube if you've subscribed to the YouTube channel. June and July eclipse season, June and July 2020 eclipse season, critical dates and degrees to know. In that video, I cover the 2020 mid-year eclipse season with an eye towards how to know if you're going to be personally affected by any of the eclipses, whether that effect will be challenging or easy to accommodate into your life, and what dates you're going to want to keep an eye on in the upcoming affected by any of the count them, 3 eclipses that we're about to move through, including tomorrow's. But you can find that online. There's a link in the video description. If you need an eclipse refresher, you're going to want to catch my video, 3 important eclipse essentials that you need to know. There's a link for that also in the video description. And please follow Mystick Physick Astrology on Facebook. Be sure to like and share this broadcast if you're joining us from Facebook. And if you're on YouTube watching us live, I would invite you to subscribe to the Mystick Physick Astrology YouTube channel. And go ahead and click on that notification bell, whichever